Hello again and welcome back to VID-O-RAMA, where we remember the VHS releases of the past in graphic detail. I'm delighted you could join me today. My name's Aaron Jones and I'm an artist, and on this channel that the algorithms love to hate, I paint tributes to movies that we rented on video back in the day. This time round I'll be painting a tribute to Subspecies that was released on video by Full Moon Entertainment in 1991. It was directed by Ted Nicolaou and it starred Hove as Radu the Vampire. As you can see, I've prepared the drawing beforehand and it's been transferred to card and it's all set for painting. Subspecies has the distinction of being the very first American movie to be made in Romania, and they made full use of all the beautiful surrounding landscapes of Transylvania along with their historical architecture and ruins. The film also has a focus on Romanian folklore, so when you combine all those elements along with the acting and music, I find that Subspecies has a distinct Eastern European folk horror vibe to it, which lends itself beautifully to this vampire tale. A tale that was so well received, in fact, it became a franchise for Full Moon Entertainment. They released 3 more sequels after this one, along with a spin-off movie and a more recently released prequel. There were many great vampire movies released during the 80s, and as we transitioned into the 90s the trend continued. But there at the beginning of that transition we can see Radu Vladislav lurking in the shadows. You'll notice I've left a space in the middle. I intend to add the castle, so push for time, I'll do that as I go along. But I'm currently in the middle of updating the studio, trying to make things a little bit easier for me. Regular viewers will have noticed that I use old CDs and DVDs as paint palettes. They're very useful, they work great, but they can be a little bit fiddly when you're trying to use a camera. And so today I shall be launching my latest invention, the hands-free hand. My new invention, I will no longer be limited to having only 2 hands. Now as an artist I can multitask. First order of business, get some paint on this so I can paint my tributes to Subspecies. Colours I'll be using today will be Mars Black, Titanium White, Cadmium Red and Light Blue. As ever, the final detail is added with pens. But before I use this lovely paint, I will use a pen to thin out the outline on this border. I should have used a thinner outline before I photocopied it, but what can you do? So while I do this, I'll tell you about the plot of Subspecies. 3 college students, Michelle and Lillian from America, and Mara, a native to Transylvania, visit Freshmere Fortress in Transylvania to study the local folklore there during the run-up to the Festival of the Undead. Unbeknown to them, they are researching the history of Transylvanian vampires during a power struggle. King Vladislav, the king of the vampires, has been murdered by his firstborn son Radu, who believes that the Bloodstone, which is a relic said to drip the blood of saints that grants eternal life to a vampire that drinks from it, rightfully belongs to him, and not his half-brother, the reluctant vampire Stefan, who had been summoned back to the old country by his father before his death. So while Stefan decides what to do about his brother, he meets the girls and develops feelings for Michelle. Then one day, while the girls are visiting the castle, Lillian accidentally cuts herself on the door, and this makes Radu aware of them. He promptly follows them and feeds on Lillian's injured arm and kidnaps Mara. Michelle quickly realises that the vampire tales they had been researching are in fact true, and she's now caught between 2 brothers and a legacy. Brilliant stuff. 4 bats out of 5. And as I said before, Subspecies could have been just another vampire movie had it not been for it being shot on location in Romania. Director Ted Nicolaou saw the potential and he went for it. Just defining the inside of the border now. Right, so that's the initial border done. I'd like this to look like an ancient wall painting, and I'd like it to look weathered over the centuries. And so I will be using a method I used back on the Black Christmas tribute, where I painted snow on the glass, where I take this regular household sponge, mix the colour I want, and stipple on the effect. And so if I keep going, it will eventually look as though the paint is chipped and flaked over the years. Basically undoing what I have just done. As you do. Well, I do. Now, the making of Subspecies is an interesting vampire legend of its own. Despite various complications, it came about thanks to the can-do attitude of Ted Nicolaou. Born in Poughkeepsie, New York, Ted Nicolaou's father was doing his residency as a Freudian psychoanalyst before moving the family to Dallas when Ted was 5. During high school, Nicolaou would write stories and poetry along with playing the guitar, and he performed folk music around various coffee houses, eventually getting into rock and roll and performing in a band. When it came to settling on a career, he had intended to follow in his father's footsteps and become a doctor, and he enrolled at the University of Texas in Austin, while still performing in a band that played psychedelic versions of 50s music. As this went on, he soon realised that being a doctor was not for him. Then one day he dropped some acid and he went to see Federico Fellini's Juliet to the Spirit, and it changed his life. He realised that if he made movies, he could utilise all the creative things that he had enjoyed doing prior, and so he promptly switched majors and joined the radio, television, film department with his friend Daniel Pearl. During this time, he was involved in various student films and with his classmates formed a small documentary company making various training movies and public information films. One of which was a movie called Shootout that had been commissioned by the Texas Department of Public Safety, the DPS. The story goes that a drug bust scene in the film had impressed Tobe Hooper, who was looking for an editor for his new movie project, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, at the time. And so he hired Daniel Pearl, and on that, Nicolaou, who had graduated film school that summer, was brought in to be the sound guy on the film. It's also worth mentioning that it was Nicolaou's own van that was used in the movie. A few years later, after the successful release of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he was trying unsuccessfully to put a horror movie together. His work friends, who had since moved to LA, urged him to do the same, namely Larry Carroll, who was working as an editor on the infamous adventure comedy Raw, starring Tippi Hedren at the time. So Nicolaou followed his advice and moved to LA in 1977 to work on the movie. Raw is worthy of a Google search. When he got to LA, Carroll had left production to work on the movie Tourist Trap with their film school buddy David Schmoller, and so Nicolaou took over as editor on Raw. All was going as well as can be expected on Raw when production was halted for a year following a 10-foot flood that had caused all manner of damage to the sets and equipment. And so Carroll invited him to join them as an editor on Tourist Trap instead, and so he left Raw, which would eventually be released in 1981, and worked on Tourist Trap. A move that would bring him into contact with one Mr. Charles Band, who was serving as executive producer on the film at the time. You know, an influential film producer and director in his own right. It's important to me that I don't seem to be glossing over Band's importance here. Summing up his career in a few paragraphs somehow feels wrong to me. That's why I intend to come back and paint a tribute to one of his own movies someday. But yeah, after Tourist Trap, Band and Nicolaou would collaborate on many projects. In fact, his autobiography, Confessions of a Puppet Master, Band described Nicolaou as his jack of all trades, because he could handle absolutely anything that was thrown at him. He hired Nicolaou as an editor to fix The Day Time Ended, a film that was released in 1979, and having worked as an editor on Butcher, Baker, Nightmare Maker for another studio in 1981, Band brought him back to edit Ghoulies and Trancers in 1984. Impressed by Nicolaou's can-do attitude, he not only hired him to edit the anthology fantasy horror film Rage War, also known as Dungeon Master, but he also allowed him to write and direct the Desert Pursuit segment for the film, before having him direct the Linda Blair segment for Savage Island. I will add that he didn't actually use his own name on that one, he used his cat's name as an alias. Now one of the regulars at Empire International Pictures, Band had another project for him. Band would always famously start all his projects with a poster, and in this instance he showed Nicolaou a poster featuring a satellite dish with a big eye in it. The title was TerrorVision. Nicolaou had all sorts of ideas, but ultimately decided it should be a comedy. Band agreed, and the movie was shot back to back with Troll in Italy. TerrorVision, I highly recommend. Unfortunately, as is often the case, TerrorVision's brilliance was not realised on its release. The critics didn't like it, and it only played in theatres for 4 days, not really finding its audience until it was released on VHS, but thankfully, these days it's getting the recognition it richly deserves. But following TerrorVision's then disappointing response, he was on Dino De Laurentiis' studio outside Rome during the pre-production of the tentatively titled Space Sluts in a Slammer, a title that he hated and was determined to change, when it was announced that Empire Pictures had folded. Again, I feel that the story of Empire Pictures would be better suited for the upcoming, yet to be decided upon, Charles Band movie tribute video. I'm thinking Ghoulies. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. During the 1980s, studios had discovered that foregoing the cinematic release of a movie and just releasing it directly to the public, or straight to video if you will, was a sure way to turn a profit, as they could use the ever-popular video rental stores to push their movies. We saw a slew of low-budget movies being released, the first ever direct-to-video release being E-Nick, A Legend in His Own Mind, which was released in 1984. Many others followed on, and as they had smaller budgets and in some cases smaller production values, it wasn't long before the term straight-to-video was regarded as a bad thing, implying that the film was in some way inferior to a theatrical release. And with many of these being sequels to popular theatrically released movies, many came to regard the release as a simple cash grab by the studios, cashing in on the success of the superior product. Harsh? I certainly didn't think so, but suffice to say, at this moment in time, Charles Band had already seen the potential in straight-to-video and had since gone on to form a new company that specialised in horror and fantasy films released on video. Full Moon Entertainment was established in 1988, and it was pitched to Paramount Pictures as the Marvel Comics of the 90s, in that the company would have a host of characters that would have their own individual adventures and crossovers, and that the company would have a rapport with its audience, and they would release a new movie every 30 days. A deal was struck with Paramount and Full Moon Entertainment, and they released Puppet Master in 1989, which proved to be a huge hit for the company, kick-starting a plethora of direct-to-video greats. So by 1989, Full Moon Entertainment's revolution was in full swing, but a somewhat different revolution had taken place in Romania, namely the Romanian Revolution. A violent upheaval had flared up across Romania in December '89, and it was followed by a series of violent riots taking place in Bucharest that eventually resulted in communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife being put on trial and executed by firing squad on Christmas Day, ending 42 years of communist rule in Romania. Keeping it light, folks. Until that moment in time, all movies made in Romania had been funded by the government through their Ministry of Culture, who would oversee all productions and approve scripts based on how it represented the communist regime. And throughout that time, Bufta Studios, established in 1950, had been responsible for most film productions in Romania. At the start of the 1990s, Band was representing Full Moon Entertainment at the American film market when he was approached by a Romanian expat called Ion Ionescu, who was now living in Los Angeles, who pitched the idea of filming movies in Romania instead. Aside from it being way cheaper to make movies out there, the Romanian government would also finance it. All Band had to do was bring a cast and a script to Romania and pay for the post-production, and Ionescu would take care of everything else. The proposal appealed greatly to Band. Cost-cutting aside, he had an idea for a vampire movie. Charles Band's first port of call for director was Stuart Gordon-Lewis, who had previously directed Reanimator for him, along with From Beyond and Dolls. But Lewis turned down the opportunity to fly out to a post-revolution Romania to make a movie, and so Band turned to Ted Jack-of-all-trades Nicolaou instead. Desperate to direct again, Nicolaou agreed to fly out to Romania for a week to survey the land, so to speak, scout for locations, and when he got there he met with two other people that would prove essential in the making of Subspecies. Cinematographer Vlad Pănescu and his partner, costume designer Oana Tufan. Vlad Pănescu had worked as a cinematographer on various Romanian films, such as Contest in 1982, and the dramas The Return from Hell and The Sand Cliffs, released in 1983. Chained Justice, 1984, Domnii Shara Aurica, 1986, and Flames Over Treasures, a film produced by Romania Film concerning a gold mine in the Transylvanian Alps reportedly to be haunted. That had gone on to win a prize for direction at the Romanian National Film Festival in 1987. Drumet in Calea, Lupin, 1988. Those Who Pay With Their Lives in 1989, which was the Romanian entry for the Best Foreign Language Film at the 67th Academy Awards, but it was not accepted as a nominee. So he was establishing himself as a cinematographer of distinction when the revolution started. In fact, he had rushed to the Palace of Parliament to film the mass protest outside and joined the protesters that stormed the building after Ceausescu had fled in his helicopter. As for Oana, as a child she liked to draw, but it seems her parents didn't think it was a suitable career for her. But apparently her maths teacher had urged them to reconsider, and so they met with a design teacher who turned out to be Nicolaou Alexei, who also believed she should pursue design. She enrolled in art school and became especially interested in theatre design, and after graduating she worked at the Romanian Theatre for 2 years, before moving on to work at Bufta Studios, where she would meet Pănescu. She had been asked to design the costumes for Domni Shari Orica, which saw her being awarded a prize for the Romanian Filmmakers Union. When they met with Nicolaou, Vlad Pănescu could not speak English, and so he had Oana speak on his behalf, and then the couple showed him all the possible shooting locations around Romania, which impressed Nicolaou. The studio and its equipment, not so much, but he believed that this would potentially give the movie a distinct European vibe, and so he returned to the US and told Band that he would do it. Subspecies was a go. No vampire movie is complete without the presence of a dark, imposing castle, and that's what we'll be putting right here. And this is Bran Castle, or as it's known to the millions of tourists that visit Transylvania each year, Dracula's Castle. Although there's no evidence to suggest that Vlad the Impaler ever lived here, or that Bram Stoker even knew it existed, it did stop the Romanian Tourist Board capitalising on the Dracula name and calling it Dracula's Castle. It's also where they filmed Subspecies. This place is beautiful. Look at those rocks. The first known fortress here was apparently in 1211 by the Knights of Teutonic, because Bran Pass was known as a trade route across the Carpathian Mountains. But it seems the Mongols destroyed that one in 1242. They used this similar shot of the castle a few times in the film, and this is the doorway the girls were taking photos at. With it being such a beautiful day, let's do some sketching. Quite a history here. In 1377, King Louis I of Hungary allowed the Transylvanian Saxons to build a castle here as a defence against the Ottoman Empire, at their own expense, and the town of Bran would eventually just grow around the castle. Completed 10 years later, the castle was used as a customs post for anyone wanting to cross the mountain pass between Transylvania and Wallachia. They believe that Vlad the Impaler, when he was ruler, would have passed through this area, but he had no control of the fortress. You know, back in the day I was always being told that I should draw landscapes, but I resisted. It just didn't appeal to me. Guess it was just the wrong sort of scenery. It would seem that had they plonked me in front of Dracula's castle, I would have quite happily done it. I was sitting outside sketching Whitby Abbey a few years back, so to be doing the same thing here in Transylvania this time round is fantastic. This is great. So, with a rough sketch completed, we can now set about adding the castle to the painting. I'm drawing a rough outline at first, just to give myself a working area, and then I'll add the detail as I go along. Obviously, while I was out there, I took numerous photos for reference. So Subspecies was now in production. The script was written by David Pabian, who had previously written Puppet Master 2 and Crash and Burn. When he was commissioned to write the script, he had been urged by Band to write in the impish subspecies characters that featured on the poster art. And having watched the production of Richard Wagner's Parsifal, he was inspired to write a story about two brothers clashing over an item that kept vampires alive, thus giving us the Bloodstone. However, while over in Romania, Nicolaou found that it was difficult to fit the newly scouted locations within the script, and so he contacted former classmate Jack Hansen, who had previously written Trances 2 under the name of Jackson Barr, to rewrite the script for him, which would have a heavier focus on Romanian folklore, aided by the Romanian folklorist hired during the movie's pre-production. Casting the film, Band was always keen to cast known names in his movies, so the great Angus Scrimm, best known for his portrayal of the Tall Man in the Phantasm movies, was cast as Ladislav, the King of the Vampires. Scrimm would fly out to Romania for what was meant to be a 2-day shoot, that ended up being just the one after his flight had been diverted. For the girls caught up in this brotherly feud, Laura Mae Tate was cast as Michelle. The movie credits her as Laura Tate, and IMDb has her credited for being in Dallas, Matlock and 30-something, before starring in Dead Space, the 1991 remake of Roger Corman's Forbidden World. Lillian was played by Michelle McBride, whom had been in Corman's 1989 remake of Mask of Red Death, starring Patrick Macnee. Mara was played by Irina Movila. Please, apologies if I'm mispronouncing these names. She was a native from Bucharest, and she had previously starred in Death of an Artist and The Ashes of the Dream Bird. For the role of Stefan, Michael Watson, who was working on ABC's daytime soap opera General Hospital, was hired. Apparently, having attended the audition during his lunch break, he got back to the studio and suggested to fellow cast member Angus Hove that he should audition for the part of Radu the Vampire. Thankfully he did, and he got the job. Born in Greenland in 1956, Hove's mother was a nurse and his father was a meteorologist, and it seems that they were also involved in Greenland politics, helping to establish the government there until they moved to Denmark when he was in his teens. Having studied law and economics in order to take over his father's business, he chose acting instead, attending drama school in Denmark. During his time on the stage, he was also cast in the Danish movie In the Middle of the Night, which was released in 1984, and he also appeared on TV in The Wolf at the Door and Murder in the Dark in 1986. And after marrying American modern dance choreographer Anthyla Crossett, the couple relocated to the States, and his career took off when he was hired to play the villainous Cesar Faison on General Hospital. Hove's performance is high on my list of reasons that I enjoy this movie. He is clearly relishing the part of Radu, delivering a unique, wonderful performance and a distinctive voice which, by his own admission, came about due to the large quantities of red wine and cigarettes consumed over the several weeks they had been waiting to shoot the movie. Like most vampires of the 80s and 90s, Radu is a messy eater, so I thought it would be fun to have some of the blood dripping from his lips, which is basically dripping onto the photograph of the girls at the bottom of the picture. As for Radu's appearance, handsome vampires were an ongoing thing in Hollywood at the time, and we see it again in Subspecies with the casting of Michael Watson as Stefan. But in this instance, it provides us with a contrast to the design of Radu. Nicolaou said that he had never been into vampire movies, being more of a Frankenstein fan, and so the image of a dapper vampire just didn't appeal to him. He wanted his vampire to have a classic look about him, a look that harked back to Nosferatu, an image he remembered seeing in Famous Monsters magazine. Not since Klaus Kinski's makeup on Nosferatu the Vampire or Kurt Barlow in Salem's Lot in 1979 had we had this permanent rat-bat features on a vampire. More often their faces would sort of revert or partially revert to something that resembled an animal when they were about to make the kill. So to see a vampire made up like this all the time was a welcome sight, personally speaking.
Delighting the cheese knife set for just £3.
Yo, tapeheads, it's your pal, VID-O-RAMA here, welcome back. Hey, let's check out some fan mail. First up, we have a postcard thanks from Jonathan Preston from North Wales, who also sent us this fabulous stained glass bat.
Look at that, we'll have to hang that up somewhere.
He also sent a joke. What is a vampire's favourite fruit? A nectarine.
Next up we have John H. Shelton from Nottingham.
And he writes, Vlad, love the I especially enjoyed the Kaiju Godzilla episodes. Perhaps you could feature Gamera in future. Who knows, John? Watch this space. Birthdays. Check out this cool dude. It's long-time VID-O-RAMA fan club member Alex Taylor from Texas. Happy birthday to you, Alex. Thanks for watching the show and thanks for your support. Happy birthday. Hey, camera 2, are you getting this? Look at this bodacious babe. Beth Jones from Beckenham, Kent. It's your birthday. Happy birthday to you. She also sends a joke. What's big, red, and eats rocks? A big red rock eater. Thanks again. Happy birthday. If you would like to join the VID-O-RAMA fan club, check out Cortex page 1313 or check out the address at the end of the show. Next up we have...
Let's be honest, making a movie isn't easy at the best of times, but filming a movie in a foreign country 8 months after a revolution and getting it done, that is something that should be applauded. And that's what they did. It was cold and grim out there in Romania. On what had originally been intended to be just a 3-week shoot, the hotel that the cast and crew stayed at in Bucharest had bullet holes in its outer walls left over from the revolution. Things were naturally still tense out there during filming, and protests would erupt in the streets with the citizens reacting to the rise in prices, as documented on Full Moon's Video Zone, the behind-the-scenes video magazine, when they featured the making of Subspecies. Shops were practically empty and certain basic items could not be obtained, and this proved to be a culture shock for many of the American members of the crew. In his book, Band held Ionescu accountable, saying that he had failed to provide the cast and crew with the basics such as clean drinking water, and that, along with having them sleeping in cold hotels and eating wretched meals, he said that Ionescu had elevated his own importance on set and spread mistrust amongst the crew. So difficult was the shoot that it prompted Nicolaou to write a journal, and he reported the crew striking when their wages weren't paid on time, various delays in production, and bouts of heavy drinking and fighting amongst the cast and crew. He also had a difficult working relationship with Hove, which thankfully passed as filming went on, and they became firm friends. On location, full access was granted to the churches, cemeteries and tombs in return for a small donation. Amusingly, locals were reportedly dismissive of the Americans being there and a little insulted by the vampire subject matter of the movie, apparently waving vampires away as purely a Western invention while openly believing in werewolves. As for these guys, the subspecies themselves, that David Papian had been instructed to write into the script, they were originally Romanian dancers in suits filmed on an impressive overscaled set. However, while looking over the footage, costume issues and the over-eager performance of some of the performers had them deciding to reshoot the scenes, and so they reluctantly used stop motion instead. They turned to visual effects artist and Charles Band regular David Allen to lend his stop motion expertise. Having worked on such things as the Pillsbury Doughboy ads in the 60s, Flesh Gordon in the 70s, and Q the Winged Serpent and Willow in the 80s, he had been collaborating with Band since Laser Blast in 1978, and further worked with him on Dolls, Puppet Master, and Bride of the Reanimator, to name just a few off the top of my head. Isolating scenes that had already been shot, they made background plates of them and filmed the new Subspecies creatures, which were a combination of rod and stop-motion puppets in front. Opinions vary, and Nicolaou didn't care for them being in the movie, but I believe having them adds a familiar full moon look to Subspecies. Understandably, with the issues and complications that I mentioned, it's no surprise that they went over schedule. It took them 14 weeks, but they did it, and power to them. The movie was shown to the executives at Paramount and they loved it, and they asked for a sequel, and Band wasted no time in sending Nicolaou back to Romania to make it into a franchise, with the filming of Subspecies 2 and 3 back to back. And there lies the other strength of Subspecies, the sequels. Because they follow directly after one another, they almost feel like a extended movie. If you give it the time, you learn more about the characters and their objectives, further defining them. But if this is not for you, you could stop after the first film. But you will be missing out. Following on from this movie, Michelle McBride went on to appear in a TV movie called Prey the Chameleon in 1992. And this would be her last acting job. Already frustrated by the industry's attitude towards women, she was pregnant during the filming of Prey the Chameleon, and so she decided to stay at home and raise her daughter and turn her back on acting. Leaving acting behind made her realise that she preferred other artistic outlets such as writing, painting and singing. In 2022 she teamed up with blues vocalist and guitarist Mark Fitchett, and they formed the Mark Fitchett Band featuring Michelle McBride. They can be found online, and I will leave a link to their channel in this video's description. Sadly, the working conditions in Romania were especially hard on Laura Tate. During her time there, she had left her 2 children in her mother's care, and the delays in shooting meant that she was away from them for far longer than promised. Being without them was already taking its toll, and then one night she woke up in her hotel room to find a man standing over her. She soon left the project and returned to America. As they hadn't finished all her scenes, a stand-in had to be found. So if you go back and watch the film, the scene where the girls meet with the old lady that tells them about the bloodstone, she makes Tate's character wear a mask. It's to disguise the stand-in. Laura Tate was invited to come back for the sequels, but declined, and so her character was instead played by Denise Duff, who would become a regular in the franchise. But Tate went on to have an appearance on Wes Craven's TV show Nightmare Cafe, and followed that with a thriller With Deadly Intent in 1991, Midnight Sting in 1992, I Love Trouble in 1994 and California Myth in 1999. Having travelled around the world working as a model and actress, nowadays she works as a journalist, writer, editor, social media and content marketer, and owns a small marketing business, as well as a travel blog. As for Irina Movila, she would graduate from the Academy of Theatre and Film the year of Subspecies release, and in 1992 she starred in Inspector Van Lock and Hotel Deluxe, both directed by her husband Dan Pitter. In 1994 she won the award for the Most Valuable Hope of European Cinema at the Geneva International Film Festival for her role as Fifi in the film Pepe and Fifi. And between 1992 and 2001 she performed at the Small Theatre Bucharest, and has since been working at the National Theatre since 2002. As for Radu, Hove returned to the US and continued to play Cesar Faison on General Hospital, leaving the role in 1992. Considered one of the show's most iconic villains, he would appear in both General Hospital's crossover series Loving in 1993 and Port Charles in 2000. He would return to the main show 12 years later in 2012 for 2 years and come back again in 2011. And at the time of recording this, it's been reported that he's returning to General Hospital again. He also worked on the Canadian soap opera Family Passion and appeared on the Beauty Rest episode of Tales from the Crypt, and he played Rick on Critters 4. For Vlad and Oana, they would marry and establish Castel Film Studios with Charles Band in 1992, becoming one of the largest Romanian production houses. As film production in Romania took off, they were at the forefront of it all, working with various international motion picture companies, wanting to take advantage of the Romanian locations, high production values and low cost. During those early Subspecies trilogy years, Castel Film Studios also produced other full moon movies, including Mandroid 1992, Dark Angel The Ascent, Oblivion and Lurking Fear in 1993, Trances 4 and 5 in 1994. Penescu worked on several of the full moon movies and would eventually make his directorial debut in 2015 with the film Live. It was presented at 14 international festivals and won the Romanian Film Festival. He followed that with a second film in 2021, The Ladder, which premiered at the Transylvania International Film Festival. As for Oana, she continued to design costumes for movies and received 2 GoPo Award nominations, one in 2009 and the other in 2015. Her designs have been exhibited, so it's fair to say that she's now considered to be the most prolific costume designer in Romania. And the Lifetime Achievement Award that was given to her at the Transylvania International Film Festival in 2019 confirms it. I want the photo to look creased and torn, as if it's been tugged and pulled in different directions by these little imps. And in order to tie in Radu and the photo of the girls, we will have some blood dripping onto the actual photo. I think this will establish both some movement and effectively the figures coming out of the painting. I've been a bit sparing with the blood this time round, haven't I? Hope you'll forgive me. I think it's fair to say that the 1990s was a busy time for Nicolaou. Setting Subspecies and Subspecies 2 and 3 aside, he was both writing and directing, but I will focus on the directing. He directed Bad Channels, which was released in 1992. Another fun one, the film concerns two aliens that invade a radio station in order to capture female humans using radio broadcasts. Initially, he didn't want to be involved in this one as he felt it was rather close to Terrorvision, but he agreed as he was drawn to the idea of making fake music videos. Then, following Subspecies 3, Full Moon had formed a new division, Moonbeam Entertainment, that focused on family-friendly fantasy movies, and this increased his workload. He directed Remote, 1993, Dragon World, 1994, Leaping Leprechauns, 1995, which was filmed back-to-back with Spellbreaker Secret of the Leprechauns, that was released in 1996. The same year as Magic in the Mirror, filmed back-to-back with Magic in the Mirror Foul Play, released in 1997. The Shrunken City, 1998, and Dragon World The Legend Continues in 1999. During this time, he would return to the world of the vampires and subspecies on two occasions, the spin-off movie Vampire Journals in 1997, and then Subspecies 4 Bloodstorm in 1998. Continuing on with the idea that this is painted on an old wall, I'm going to put some horizontal lines across just to partially suggest that there's brickwork behind it, as if the paint has come away. Going back to the movies of Ted Nicolaou, having seemingly finished with vampires, he went on to direct the previously shelved Full Moon project Ragdoll, which was released in 1999, the same year as Lip Service. Then on to 2000, where he made the found footage film The St. Francisville Experiment and The Horrible Look the Bones, along with an episode of Full Moon Fright Fest. Apparently, according to him, things had slowed down a little at this point, and so he started directing documentaries that featured as DVD extras. Along with the behind-the-scenes documentary on the making of Martin Scorsese's Silence, he also directed Dali and Disney, A Dates with Destino, which was about Walt Disney and Salvador Dali's friendship and their collaboration projects. Then, wanting to get back into directing movies and following on from working on an unreleased movie in India, he reluctantly directed Puppet Master vs. Demonic Toys for the Sci-Fi Channel in 2004, the same year as In the Shadow of the Cobra. Then there was Aliens Gone Wild in 2006, and that was followed by his supernatural horror The Etruscan Mask in 2007, the spiritual docudrama movie Finding Happiness 2014, and then he released the horror Don't Let Her In 2021. So a very busy and varied career. But to wrap things up here with Subspecies, it was at around 2000 he had written a prequel to Subspecies. Cast and crew were keen to do it, but as Full Moon had hit a financial rough patch, band had been unable to finance it, or at least without compromising the story. So it was held back for a time, 20 years in fact. It was 2020 when they set about making it happen. It's interesting to note that by the time they were ready to return to Romania to make a new Subspecies movie, the country that Full Moon had essentially helped bring their film industry to the masses was now way too expensive to film at. And so Nicolaou found himself having to scout for locations in Albania instead. COVID hit, shutting them down, and they ended up filming Subspecies 5 Blood Rise in Serbia instead. Released in 2023, we were treated to a new chapter that this time explored the origins of Radu. 25 years since the last film, 32 years after we first saw Radu step out of the shadows to claim what was rightfully his, and continue to make the vampires of Transylvania something to fear. Thank you for joining me today and keeping me company. I've enjoyed our time together, and as ever I hope you found this interesting and you approve of the final painting. If so, let me know so in the comments below. And please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Help me defeat the evil algorithms of YouTube. If this is your first time here, you can help in another way by checking out the rest of the channel. We're close to 50 videos now, so we must have featured another movie that you love. So were you paying attention? Did you spot the green duck? If so, write the timestamp in the comments below. My sincerest of thanks to McBride and Ted Nicolaou. I would like to take this opportunity to thank those of you out there that have bought prints this past year. And a huge thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters. Thank you for your kindness and your support and your patience. This video took a little bit longer to be released than I would have liked, but we got to try out some new things, so I'd like to think it's justified. Hope you feel the same way, and I genuinely hope you've enjoyed this video. If you would like to follow their example and join the VID-O-RAMA Video Club on Patreon, check out the video's description for all the relevant information. I think for the next video we'll go forward a few years and paint a tribute to another 90s vampire movie, so make sure you ring that bell to be notified when that one's uploaded. So dear viewer, thanks again for watching, and until next time, good night out there, whatever you are.